Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at the Pagfeek Papers, a 1973 underground from Mark Morrison, published by Kitchen Sink Comics. This is a very odd underground. Kind of reminds me of Dan Klein's Hungry Chuck Biscuits, where it's an underground comic published in the heyday of the undergrounds. Well, kind of right before the bust, but doesn't rely on any kind of hippie humor, political humor. There is some drug references, but it's really just trying to be funny and tell some gags and some lots of clever dialogue, So it's definitely an interesting underground. It's wasn't very popular, this kind of stuff. The guy's not a very good artist. He has a kind of cute little style for what he's doing, but it's not going to blow you away or anything. He does all the art in this, including the cover here. But I thought the dialogue was pretty clever in this. So we see a little family album here. Great Uncle P. Ben Bow Wad, who's not even in the comic. Our main character, Great Uncle P. Bosco Wad. P. Balswick Wad, who I think is his nephew, and a friend of the family, Gunzo. And we start off with Bosco, and he's talking to his frog friend, Henry. And just to give you, I'll read some of the dialogue, he throws out so many jokes in every word balloon. And so he's showing him a photo album. He tells Henry, this is an army picture of Cousin Wayne, just after they busted him to vegetable. A fine figure of a yam. Yes, they sent him home in a flag-draped crate marked perishable. Well, he kept perfectly all winter, and we put him out that spring. We wanted him to sort of send down roots. But the dogs licked him constantly, and he kept trying to force his attention on the rhubarb. And Granny Wad kept asking, think that Wayne'll hurt the rhubarb? So that fall, Great Uncle Wad carved him for a jack-o'-lantern. It's very bizarre, surreal wordplay going on. So he's continuing to talk to Henry, and then Henry's wife calls, and he's got to run. So Bosco proceeds to clean the house, and he's singing this crazy old saucy song. It was like a dirty limerick type lyrics. I once knew a girl who liked the prong, but always brought her dog along. And it continues from there. So Balswick, his nephew, and his friend Gunzo come home on this rocket ship. I guess Cousin Billy was killed on the trip. And of course, there's a very humorous story about how he was killed. One night, Bosco is out in the garden killing critters. Kills this rabbit. What's up, Doc? Right before he can finish his sentence. So the next morning, he's out having a walk with Gunzo. And he says, what's up with your mouth? There's germs, thousands of them. And Gunzo says, I thought germs was too small to see. Nonsense, they have perfect vision. And so, basically Bosco's a doctor, and he has this fanatical need to, be a doctor and heal people. So he takes out this hammer, and he's just like, you have to let me perform on you. And Gunzo's like, get the fuck off of me. So it's so weird. He gives in, he relents, and says, okay, it's your funeral. But then he proceeds to just keep whacking him in the nose every chance he gets. And Gunzo's like, what the hell are you doing? And the whole time he's telling him a story about another great uncle who blew out his own brains and left the gun to him as an heirloom. And Bosco turns around, and there's this giant bird, so big it's hovering over the mountains here. We can see it over these hills, and he shoots it. Fucking giant birds get worse every year. This is very weird shit going on in this comic. You know, I guess I'll call him Doc from now on, because Bosco's just, I think, his middle name. So, Gunzo is recuperating from the constant attacks on his nose. He's been passed out for 2 days. And even though the doc caused it, he can't help but go in there and try to do some surgery on him or some kind of crazy operation on him. But Gunzo now has that gun, the family heirloom gun, and every time he gets close to him, he basically aims at his head. And says, you know, basically, get the fuck away from me, you psycho. Doc recommends euthanasia for Gunzo. Then he sings another song. This one's more about, like, how he should be put out to pasture. He's ready to be thrown on the compost heap. You can roll me there like a sack of shit, and I won't make a peep. So he sees Henry again, his frog friend, offers him some really strong moonshine. And he basically says, I'm hitting the road. I've left home. He says, I'm 118 years old. It's time I did something with my life. I forgot to mention it, that 119-year-old great uncle who tried to kill himself. He did it at 119. I thought that was a weird idea. Someone at 119 living that long and then killing themselves. So the frog is bemoaning the fact that his wife is, she's always nagging him. He's not bringing home enough flies. They're going hungry. So he says, oh, I better start fly casting. And he takes his fishing pole out and he starts fly casting. He's basically fishing for flies. He has some fake plastic vomit as a lure, tricking the flies into flying over it. And he finally catches a big one. It's a horsefly, though. And he stomps it into the ground. And then he puts some of that moonshine on it and incinerates it. So they're talking about leaving home together. The frog's contemplating maybe coming with him. But as soon as his wife yells, Henry, he comes running. The next morning, he's back at home, Doc. And it's a beautiful day, and he's all excited. He can't wait to start the day. He's going to have some breakfast. But before breakfast, he's like, oh, I might as well take these bennies that I spilled out of this bottle. There's only a couple of them. And then he finds some hooch that he forgot about under his bed. He's like, I shouldn't eat on an empty stomach. So by the time breakfast comes around, he's completely zonked out. Looks like Doc's figured out a way to have a bad morning after without ever having the night before. So they get a letter from their from Uncle Ernie, or cousin, well, his cousin Ernie. He's a hermit who lives with a giant car named Rollo. Rollo's going to be away for a few weeks, so he wants them to drop by for a visit. Because he's such a hermit, he only wants people to visit him when he's not there. They also get a letter from cousin Gloria. Says she got a new job. She said she gone out west as a test whore in a fuck factory. This is so weird. So they get in their rocket ship and they fly off to Ernie's planet. They're looking around and they see the mailbox for Ernie in these steps. And they realize that Gunzo landed the spaceship right on top of Ernie's house and completely destroyed it. It's just a big crater now. And Gunzo is really sorry. He says, I'll build him anything he wants. And he whacks him with his stick. Doc says, Ernie won't be wanting shit, Gunzo. I scheduled us to land the day before he left. Thought I would rankle his ass just for fun. So apparently Ernie was in the house, so he's gone too. So they have a little funeral for him. They put a little gravestone near their mailbox. And Doc tells the story about when him and Ernie kind of rode a train on some woman in a hotel room in Baltimore. And his nephew says, you don't send a man off with a fuck story, Doc. And he keeps bringing up the fact that it's Gunzo's fault. And Gunzo's just crying harder and harder. He's really regretful about this. It's kind of funny the way he, like, after everything he says, he mentions, yeah, and Gunzo. Still be alive if Gunzo didn't do it. And Gunzo just cries even louder. So Doc says, well, we might as well take a spin, a last spin in Ernie's Rollo. And they look up, and it's right there behind the spaceship, this giant car. I guess that was Ernie's pride and joy. So they get her rolling, and Doc falls out of the car. So Doc's left all alone. They drive off without him. He decides to have a little picnic, and this like kind of ostrich-looking guy shows up with an old blunderbuss, and he says, "I will have you for dinner." And Doc is like, "Oh, good, I'm famished." He says, well, we better be off. The missus will be starving, with her expecting and all. So he introduces her to Doc. Honey, this is our dinner. And he says, you're pregnant. And he diagnoses her. And says she has lamination of the giblets. I've got to operate on her. And he keeps handing joints to the husband. And I think the husband's so high, he allows him to do surgery on his wife. He mentions how he's bragging about what a great doctor he was. How once he performed a perfect frontal lobotomy on a deep sea sponge and removed 2 corns from a nurse's foot with my teeth before I could be subdued. Such is my passion to heal. So he says to the husband, put on some hot water. Madam, get to bed. And he puts his pillow down, and he just pulls a mallet out of his bag and kills her. Hits her right in the stomach with a sledgehammer. And her egg pops out onto the pillow. He comes out and tells the father, he says, it's a boy, a striking resemblance. This is Big Egg. And he throws it in the hot water. And he's like, we got to sterilize it. And he says, what's today's date? 14th, I think. That's your number. And he shoots him right in the head. And it's up. So he's sitting there all ready to eat the boiled egg. And then Gunzo and what's-his-face show up, his nephew. Oh, Balswick. So now they're back on Earth, and they get a letter from Ernie. It turns out Doc lied. So Ernie just wasn't at his house at the time. He's not dead, and he's totally pissed off. He's like, I invite you over to my house, and you fucking destroy my whole house, you motherfucker. What's up with the grave marker on my mailbox? And when Doc tells Gunzo about him making the whole story up, he basically says, say your prayers, you crazy fuck stick, and pumps his rifle. And Doc hightails it out of the house and Gunzo's shooting at him. He says, I may be crazy, but I'm not out of my mind. And that's it for the only issue of Pagfeek Papers, except for this little back cover. This comic book shot entirely on location. So, you gotta take my word for it. This is pretty funny. I know, like, me reciting it, I'm not that good at, telling jokes or whatever, making things funny. But it's pretty clever, and I don't know, it's kind of refreshing. I just recently read an underground. Actually, it was today. I read a Jim Mitchell underground, and it was so annoyingly, like, of its time, like hippie jokes, pot jokes, beautifully drawn, beautifully cartooned, but, like, I'm actually I kicked it out of the academy. I don't do that with many undergrounds. I save almost all my undergrounds just because I like how they reflect the time. They're almost like these sociological documents of the late 60s, early 70s. But I like this one. It's just trying to be funny. And I think it's pretty funny. Half the time. He's got a ton of jokes in it, so it's like a law of averages. Almost every word below is packed with either a punny joke or funny, clever wordplay. And, of course, like a lot of comedy stuff, sometimes it doesn't hit. But sometimes it does. And I've definitely read worse. I thought it was pretty entertaining, pretty funny. I wish I could convey it to you better. And wish I was a funnier guy. But I hope you enjoyed watching it and found it interesting. And I also hope to see you next time here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.